Good afternoon. Today we will discuss about revised National Tuberculosis Control Program. In 1962, National Tuberculosis Program was the first one to be introduced in our country against tuberculosis. But it had some problems, like it had unacceptable low treatment success rate, high death rate and high default rate. And default rate means the patients would start taking medication, but they will discontinue taking medication before the course ends. Because of that, there was a spread of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. Now, in the year of 1993, RNTCP was introduced, and it adapted the internationally accepted DOTS strategy, which is directly observed treatment short course chemotherapy. It also adapted the smear microscopy for early diagnosis of the cases, and they strengthened the drug supply. Now, what were the objectives of RNTCP in India? The first one was to achieve at least 85% of treatment success rate among new sputum positive patients. And the second one was to detect at least 70% of the estimated new sputum positive people in the community. Okay, so the first one was about the treatment success rate, which is at least 85%, and the second one was to detect the new sputum positive patients, at least 70% of them. Okay, then the NSP, or National Strategic Plan for Tuberculosis Elimination 2017 to 2025 was introduced with a vision to make India TB free with zero deaths, disease and poverty due to tuberculosis. The goal being having a rapid decline in the burden of TB, morbidity and mortality, while working towards elimination of TB in India by 2025. Okay, now coming to NTEP, that is National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. So what happened here? Recently the name of RNTCP has been changed to NTP, that is National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. I will show you later from Government of India, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, mentioning, you can see the subject, change of name of RNTCP to National Tuberculosis Elimination Program. Okay, you know what is DOTS, I mentioned that. Now it says directly observed, that means the patients must take the medication at least during the intensive phase under direct supervision of the drug provider. And short course chemotherapy means the duration of the treatment is kind of short here. Earlier it used to be like 1.5 years to 2 years, but recently since the introduction of RNTCP, it has been about 6 to 8 months, something like that, depending on the regimen. Also domiciliary versus hospital based treatment. Again, previously patients used to get admitted in hospital for treatment of tuberculosis, but it was found that there is no advantage of hospital admission for this patient. So the patients can remain at their home, they can take the medication at their home and they will get cured. So there is no added benefit for hospital admission patients. Achha. This is the organizational profile at state level. I'm not going into details about this, just remember this. In the top you can see this is the State Tuberculosis Office, and there is a State Tuberculosis Officer. Below that there is State Tuberculosis Training and Demonstration Center, followed by, this is important, District Tuberculosis Center, DTC, and there is Tuberculosis Unit. So who are the members of Tuberculosis Unit? There should be a medical officer, a senior treatment supervisor or STS, and a STLS, that is senior TB lab supervisor. There are designated microscopy centers or DMCs, and also treatment centers, and DOTS providers. These are the people who will provide the medication to the people suffering from DOTS. This is the laboratory network. So in the bottom you can see there are designated microscopy center. They will send the report to the tuberculosis unit, which is above them, and they will provide the report to the district tuberculosis center. Obviously they will give feedback to the higher center, that is the state level, which is intermediate reference laboratories, and at the top level there is national reference laboratories. At present, there are only 6 national reference laboratories in Chennai, Bangalore, Delhi, Agra, Bhubaneswar and Bhopal. Achha. Coming to the next part. Now, the diagnostic procedures for detection of cases as endorsed by RNTCP are as follows. First one is the sputum smear microscopy. So you can go for Zn staining, or you can also go for fluorescent stains. Culture, for solid culture like Lowenstein Jensen media, अथवा liquid culture like Middlebrook, etc. Number 3 is a rapid diagnostic molecular test, like conventional polymerase chain reaction based line probe assay for MTB complex, or real-time polymerase chain reaction based nucleic acid amplification test for MTB complex. The example is GenExpert. Just remember this name. There is also radiography where available and tuberculin skin test. But remember, in our country we do not follow all these diagnostic methods. We mainly depend on the sputum microscopy, sometimes culture, and rapid diagnostic test. Okay. Now coming to some newer initiative, daily regimen. The first one is daily regimen. If we look at the older regimen, we will see the drugs were taken about 3 days a week. The previous regimen says 3 days a week on alternate days the drug has to be taken. But recently the new guideline says that the drug has to be taken on daily basis, that is 7 days a week. And the next one is the introduction of a new drug known as bedaquiline in certain conditional situations. And also number 3, there is some active case finding, especially among the high risk populations through house visits and targeted setting visit like tribal populations, slum, old age homes, prisons, orphanage, transit camps, etc. Because these are the people who are susceptible to develop tuberculosis, and because of negligence, underreporting, inadequate medication, etc., they are susceptible to develop a drug resistant tuberculosis. So this is the population which has been focused on. And number 4 is patient-wise boxes containing full course of treatment. So that means individual patient will have boxes containing all the medication allotted to them only. Achha. Coming to the next part, which are the anti-tubercular drugs or ATTs. You already know the name by now. The first line drugs, there are few bactericidal drugs which kills the bacteria, and bacteriostatic drugs, which means they stop the multiplication of the bacteria. The rifampicin, isoniazid, streptomycin and pyrazinamide, that is R, H, S and Z. These are the first line bactericidal drugs. And ethambutol or E is the bacteriostatic drugs. These are the second line drugs. There are fluoroquinolones like moxifloxacin, gatifloxacin, levofloxacin, ofloxacin, etc. There is ethionamide, then capreomycin, kanamycin, amikacin. These three. These mycins are injectable second line drugs. Also there is cycloserine, thiacetazone, macrolides. These new 2 drugs, bedaquiline and delamanid, we will discuss about them later. Okay, this is another very important table. This is not exactly the classification, but they are the grouping of the anti-tuberculosis drug. You can see there are group 1, group 2, group 3 and group 4 of anti-tuberculosis drug, as well as group 5 with unclear efficacy. Anyway, we have 5 groups. You can see the first group contains the oral anti-TB drugs, the H, R, Z and E, and the streptomycin S is in the second group, which is injectable anti-TB drugs along with kanamycin, amikacin, capreomycin. Number 3 is fluoroquinolones like ciprofloxacin, ofloxacin, levofloxacin, moxifloxacin and gatifloxacin. Number 4 is oral second line anti-TB drugs. They include ethionamide, prothionamide, cycloserine, terizadone and PAS or para-amino-salicylic acid. Number 5, they are clofazimine, linezolid, coamoxiclav, thiacetazone, imipenem silastration, high-dose isoniazid or high-dose H and clarithromycin. So these are the 5 groups of anti-tuberculosis drug. Now, a few words about betaquilin. You can have betaquilin as a short note or a part of long question, or sometimes it can even be asked during the Viva exam. Just remember that betaquilin as well as delamanid, these drugs are to be given to the MDR TB patients or XDR TB patients, but not for the usual treatment of the tuberculosis. Now coming back to betaquilin or BDQ, this is new class of drug, diarylquinonil. It's a little bit difficult to remember the name. Anyway, it is a bactericidal drug. That means it kills the bacteria. It targets microbacterial ATP synthase, which is an enzyme essential to supply energy to the microbacterium. Now, what are the criteria for giving betaquilin? The first one is obviously the patient has to have MDR-TB, that is multi-drug resistance tuberculosis. You know what is MDR-TB, I guess. Resistant to both isoniazid and rifampicin, with or without any other drugs. Okay, so the person must be 18 years or above, number 1 point. And number 2 point is pregnancy is contraindicated. So if the person is pregnant, betaquilin cannot be given, and it is advised to give non-hormonal birth control pills or whatever during the period of betaquilin intake. The reason being, there are some studies showing some congenital defect among the newborn when the mother were taking betaquilin during their pregnancy. This is not yet proved scientifically, but there is some suspicion that betaquilin may be teratogenic. So this is why pregnancy is a contraindication. Also, cardiac arrhythmia is another contraindication for betaquilin therapy. So these three are the basic criteria for patient selection for betaquilin. The next drug is delamanid or DLM. So the name of the class is nitrodihydroimidazoxazole, again, which is used for treatment of multi-drug resistance tuberculosis. It has two mechanisms of action. First one is it blocks the synthesis of mycolic acid, which is the essential component of the bacterial cell wall for Mycobacterium tuberculosis. And also because of the presence of the nitro group here, they provide nitric oxide, which poisons the bacteria and kills the bacteria. So clinical trials are still going on to find out the safety and effectiveness of the drugs. But remember, like betaquilin, here also the recipient must be above 18 years. And it is generally available in a tablet form, 50 milligram. And it should be given as an appropriate combination regimen for pulmonary MDR-TB in adult patients with an effective treatment regimen cannot otherwise be composed for reasons of resistance and tolerability. That means if other regimen, MDR regimens fails or cannot be given for some other reasons, maybe there is toxicity, whatever, only in that case delamanid is to be considered. Otherwise delamanid is not used very regularly. You have to understand that the phase 3 clinical trial is still going on. So there is yet phase 4 to be done, and only after that we can say that delamanid can be introduced regularly. Achha. So what are the drug regimen for tuberculosis? Earlier, the TB cases were divided into new cases and previously treated cases, and they had different regimens. You can see in the intensive phase, for the new patients it continued for 2 months, and the continuation phase it continued for 4 months. The drugs given in the new patients were HRJD, that is isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide and ethambutol, whereas the Z, pyrazinamide, was omitted in the continuation phase, and the continuation phase was given for 4 months. Similarly, in previously treated cases, the regimen was 2 HRJDS plus 1 HRJD. So S is here the streptomycin, and continuation phase is to last for 5 months, but the regimen was same as the new patients, HR and E. Always remember this, that these 2 here, 4, 5, all these things denote the number of months for which the particular phase will continue. So for new patients, the intensive phase will continue for 2 months and the continuation will continue for 4 months. Now remember this, previously there were bracket put here around the HRJD and a small 3 was written here, or sometimes below every word like H3, R3, Z3, E3, which means how many days a week the particular drug is to be taken. So that meant intensive phase would continue for 2 months, and for every week H, R, Z and E, all these drugs to be taken 3 days a week. But as you can see, there is nothing like that at present. There is no bracket, no 3 mentioned here. So that means we are following the daily regimen. It says daily dose regimen here. So all the drugs are to be taken on daily basis. Now this was the previous regimen, but in recent years we have shifted to the new regimen, and it says there is no further classification of TB patients according to the new cases or the previously treated cases. So all cases of tuberculosis will receive 2 months of intensive phase and 4 months of continuation phase. The drug given are H, R, Z and E in intensive phase and H, R and E in continuation phase. This is isoniazid, rifampicin, pyrazinamide and ethambutol. Okay, so let's see. Now we know that for how many months and which medications are to be given to the patients. This table shows the amount of drug to be given. Now this is another new addition. Now the drugs to be given to the patients are based on their body weight. So on the left column you can see the weight category and the number of tablets or fixed drug combinations, FDCs. This is intensive phase and this is continuation phase. Now every tablet of HRJD which is to be given during IP, it contains 75 gram of, I think 75 milligram of isoniazid, 150 milligram of rifampicin, 400 milligram of pyrazinamide and ethambutol 275 milligram. So each tablet contains this amount of drugs. Similarly here 75, 150 and 275. So if suppose someone is a 60 kilogram, so 60 kg belongs to this group, 55 to 69 kg. That person has to take 4 tablets daily at a time. So basically he will be taking 4 into 75, that is 300 milligram of isoniazid and 600 milligram of rifampicin, like this. If the person is 70 kilogram or above, he has to take 5 tablets. So there is weight banding of the drug regimen for the patients. Also, if there is an adult who is severely thin, maybe because of some chronic disease, and the person weighs less than 25 kilogram, he has to be given loose drugs as per body weight, because this amount, even if he takes a single drug, will be too much for him. Okay, so this is for the adult population. What about the pediatric group? Same thing here, HRZE and HRE here, intensive and continuation phase. Also there is weight classification, weight category, different kilograms are mentioned here. So now remember this, if the weight is between 16 to 24 kilogram, he has to take 4 tablets of HRZ and 4 tablets of ethambutol. If he goes into this category, he will be taking 3 tablets of this combination along with 1A, that means adult combination of HRZ, along with 3 tablets of this ethambutol. Alright, same thing for 30 to 39 kg of body weight. Now, what are the probable causes of drug-resistant tuberculosis? Okay, from a microbiological perspective, the resistance is caused by a genetic mutation that makes a drug ineffective against the mutant bacilli. We know that. That means because of some reasons, there is some genetic recombination of the bacteria or the organism, and because of that, the drug will not act anymore on that particular organism. What happens here is sometimes we give the wrong prescription or wrong type of medication to the patients, or sometimes we give the right medication but in the wrong dosage. Also, there may be some mistakes from the patient side. That means even if the correct drug is given in the correct dosage to the patients fail to take them correctly. Either they take only partial medication, or they do not complete the course. This is also very important in case of tuberculosis. The patient must complete the course of the treatment. As I mentioned earlier, default. Sometimes what happens, patient takes the medication for 2 months or 3 months, and then they stop coming to the drug center for collection of medication. And because of that, there is development of drug-resistant tuberculosis. So the same things are mentioned here. In clinical settings, an inadequate or poorly administered treatment regimen allow drug resistance mutants to become the dominant strain in a patient infected with TB. Okay, and also from a programmatic perspective, as I was mentioning, what happens, we are not well equipped to treat the drug resistant patients. And remember, when there is a drug resistant tuberculosis, he will cough or sneeze and he will be spreading the bacilli to the other susceptible people. But what is important here, this particular type of bacilli he is spreading is of drug resistant type. So even though these people who are getting infected for the first time and getting the disease, there is no history of intake of medication in past. So these people will start with drug resistant tuberculosis. So this is another important point. Okay, so there are some difficult and very tough to remember drug regimen for drug resistant tuberculosis. Now you can see there is a regimen for mono-resistant or poly-resistant drug resistant tuberculosis, or the MDR, multi-drug resistance TB regimen. Okay, so these are the name of the medication as well as the duration. This is the intensive phase and the continuation phase. I am not going into details. All these tables, this table and the next table, are given in the book of Park or any standard textbook, also in the Government of India website, the RNTCP website, whatever. You will find the same regimen. Okay, you just look at the medication and you will know the name of the drugs here. This is levofloxacin, capreomycin, like these things. Same things are given here. So I am skipping this part. Next is the end TB strategy. This is very important. This can come as a individual short note, a long question, or a part of long question, also very important for Viva. So what is end TB strategy? So this is a diagram, not a diagram, rather a bar diagram taken from the internet basically, and the source is WHO. So this is for the month of March, updated 11th March 2020, very recent. What it shows, so coronavirus was already of importance by that time, and average disease death per day worldwide. So by that time we had about 70 deaths from coronavirus daily. As you can see, we going up and the number of deaths from that particular disease is increasing. The top is always tuberculosis. So you can see this is 70, 82, 200, 300, something like this, 400, 500, and this is 300 something, 3000 something. So you can see the death from tuberculosis is probably the highest from any communicable disease on daily basis. So this is why tuberculosis control is so much important. So this is the evolution of NTB strategy. What is NTB strategy? I will show you in the next slide. Okay, this part has been discussed, etc, etc. Okay, I'm coming to this part. So NTB strategy. What is the vision? A world free of tuberculosis, that is 0 deaths, no disease and suffering from tuberculosis. What is the goal? To have the TB epidemic end globally. There are some indicators. We have some milestones here and sustainable development goal which we are trying to achieve by 2030, but we are trying to end tuberculosis by 2035. Okay, so now here what we are trying to do here is to reduce the number of TB deaths as compared to the data in 2015. We must reduce the number by 95% by 2035. Also, the number of incidence rate, that is new TB patients as compared to 2015 data, it should be reduced by 90%. And when there is only 10 cases or less per 1 lakh population, we can say that we have reduced the incidence of TB by 90%. And catastrophic cost due to tuberculosis should be 0%. What is catastrophic cost? If a family has to spend more than 20% of their daily income or monthly income for tuberculosis, that is considered as catastrophic cost. So suppose a family earns about 10,000 rupees per month. So if the person suffering from tuberculosis has to spend 2,000 on his treatment, or any member in the family, so that will be considered as catastrophic cost due to tuberculosis, and it should be 0%. So this is a graph showing the desired decline in global TB incidence rates to reach the 2035 targets. So at present we are somewhere here, okay, and we are expected to be here because the number of incidence cases should be less than 10 per 1 lakh population by the year 2035. Okay, so the current trend, if we follow the current trend, which is about 1.5% decline every year, we shall be here. So somewhere around 80 cases per 1 lakh population, which is not acceptable. We have to be here. So this is the curve we should be following, and it will happen if we follow the end game strategy. There are certain pillars, 3 pillars are there for integrated patient-centered TB care and prevention. Number 2 is bold policies, supportive systems, and number 3 is intensified research and innovation. Let us discuss them in details. So what is for the first pillar? That is the integrated patient-centered TB care and prevention. Obviously the first method should be identifying the TB patients as soon as possible and giving them the treatment, so as to decrease their suffering as well as to prevent the spread of the tuberculosis bacilli in the susceptible population. So how can we do that? We can go for the early diagnosis and TB screening for contacts of the high risk group. So there are always high risk groups, we discussed that earlier, and their contacts should be screened for tuberculosis. Also, treatment of drug sensitive and drug resistant tuberculosis, and to give them patient support. Management of the comorbidities. If there is any other comorbidity, obviously there will be higher TB death. And prevention and treatment of persons at high risk. Vaccination against tuberculosis. So here focusing on the BCG vaccination at early as possible. Next is the second pillar, which is the policy making and supportive system. The strong political commitment is obviously important, because unless there is a support from the state government as well as the central government, it is impossible to run a national program in any country. Also, involvement of the private care providers, because what happens, not all the patients are diagnosed at government hospitals. Sometimes private practitioners, they can diagnose the TB patients. Also private hospitals, the nursing homes, etc., they can have their own TB patients. So there should be a strong cooperation between the government as well as private sector for provision of treatment and support to the TB patients. Okay. The third pillar is the intensified research and innovation. Now obviously this is very important for any disease, not only for tuberculosis but for any communicable as well as non-communicable disease. With advancement of time, there is also scope for improvement of the technology. So you have to do continuous research and studies to find out the solution to the newer solution to the older problems. So discovery, development of new tools, interventions and strategies, and also research to promote innovations. That means, say in context of tuberculosis, for last few years we have started to do more drug sensitivity or drug resistant testings, which was not available previously. Also recently we have introduced newer drugs like betaquilin, delamanid, etc. So that means with progression of time we will be inventing newer diagnostic measures, or we can be preparing newer molecules against tuberculosis for effective management of the cases. So there is always opportunities for improvement through research and development. Okay, now this is important, very important. We all know in context of HIV/AIDS there is something known as 90-90-90 strategy. What was 90-90-90 strategy in HIV/AIDS? If you remember, all the people who are living with HIV/AIDS, at least 90% of them should know about their HIV status. Number 2, whoever know about their HIV status, at least 90% of them should have sustained treatment or antiretroviral therapy for their situation or the disease. And number 3 is, whoever is having the antiretroviral therapy, at least 90% of them must have viral suppression. And all this were to be achieved by 2020. Now there is another 90-90-90 in context of tuberculosis. So don't get confused. If you see 90-90-90 strategy, it may not be from the HIV/AIDS, it may be from the tuberculosis also. So read the question properly, what it is asking about, and only then give the answer. So here it says that we must reach at least 90% of all people with tuberculosis. So that means the screening and the diagnosis has been emphasized on. After reaching them, they should be placed under appropriate therapy, first line, second line, whatever is needed. We also mentioned about some vulnerable population, and 90%, at least 90% of this key population must be approached so as to find out the cases among them, and at least 90% treatment success rate must be achieved. So for all people who are diagnosed with tuberculosis, through affordable treatment service, adherence to complete and correct treatment of social support, which is very important, so that they remain adhered to the medication throughout the course and they complete their course and get cured, and drug resistance does not emerge. So this is the 90-90-90 strategy for tuberculosis. Sometimes in some books by different authors, they have extended this 90-90-90 strategy. I will show you. For example, treatment coverage. This is basically a little bit modification of the previous one. The treatment coverage says number of people that developed tuberculosis and were notified and treated out of the total estimated number of incident cases in the same year, more than 90%. So basically, of all the incident cases, at least 90% must have treatment coverage, and treatment success rate must be at least 90%. So another 90. Next one is the preventive treatment coverage. It says number of people living with HIV and also the children who are contacts with the diagnosed cases of tuberculosis. They should start the preventive treatment for latent tuberculosis, and the number should be at least more than 90%. And the next one is TB affected household facing catastrophic cost. As I mentioned, whatever is the total income of the family, if the expense behind the TB care or for the TB care crosses 20% of the earning, it is considered to be a catastrophic cost for tuberculosis, and ideally it should be 0%. So remember, there is no 90% here. The last one is the uptake of new diagnostics and newer drugs. So number of TB patients who are diagnosed using WHO recommended rapid tests out of all TB patients, more than 90%. And also number of TB patients who were treated with regimens including new TB drugs out of those eligible with which drugs, more than 90%. So that means whoever is eligible to take the new drugs, for example, if we are talking about telomamide or bedaquiline, so the MDR patients, they should be adult, more than 18%, etc., etc., and more than 90% is expected. So that is all from today's discussion. As I mentioned earlier, I tried to keep this discussion very short because of this constraint, because it is really difficult to take a class on internet making a video like this. So go through your textbook, which is the Book of Park. Also go through RNTP websites, Government of India websites regarding tuberculosis, and you will find all this information given there. And if you have any question, you can discuss right now. Thank you very much.